Chapter 7. Darkness. What went wrong? I wish to begin this meeting with the quote, "The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated." Here, Joseph is making a humorous reference to the September 2011 public trance demonstration, at which there had been a severe psychic attack from one member of the audience, with the express intention of disrupting it, and which had left us all, Joseph included, in a depleted state. This was our first contact with Joseph since that occurrence. And I wish you to know that there were no lasting ill effects from the demonstration, other than a loss of energy and a great depletion, and disappointment that our purpose was diverted on this one occasion. I think it gives you some indication of the severity and difficulty of our task, and of the locked-in attitudes of humankind that we are trying to unlock and disperse, which leads very nicely into the theme of today's chapter, which is darkness, and how on earth, literally on earth, could darkness descend into a sphere that was originated in light, a sphere whose intentions were to further the experience of the angelic children, a sphere that is still a sphere of light beneath its crust of darkness. In the beginning, when the earth was a vehicle for angelic children, there was no society as you would understand society, but there was a brethren. Brethren is the closest word I can get to the experience, and a knowing. There was always a connection with God, and a connection with one another, so individual potential was linked to global and to divine potential. The planet was a sphere of experience with various landscapes and opportunities, and was almost a cradle, if I can liken the earth to a cradle, or an area of warmth and comfort within which new aspects of God could grow and find their feet by moving through a series of vibrational bands of challenge. There was originally a series of vibrational bands, nested, one next to the other, through which the angelic children passed in order to grow and understand their potential, and then to create new potential that was transmitted back to the angelic host, and was also taken back to the angelic host when the angelic children left the planet after the term of experience was over, once they had come to a point where the sphere had nothing more to offer them. These vibrational bands of challenge were set in place by that proportion of the angelic host that created the sphere in the first place, with God intention flowing through them, and they giving birth to the sphere, and also to their children or individualized thoughts. That is how the setup was originally supposed to run. And in the beginning there was harmony between all of God's angelic children on the earth. You have to understand that, as the individual moved through the vibrational bands of challenge and experience, it became quite competent. We are not talking in terms of earthly children, or in terms of the cradle evolving a child of 4 or 5 that then returns to its parents. At the end of a term of experience across the earthly sphere, the angelic individual had the knowledge of its parents, had a certain knowledge of the Godhead, and had, particularly and importantly, the knowledge of how to manipulate vibrations, energy fields, and the resultant heavier matter atoms to create the vistas they wanted to experience. So, originally, after a period of time, but not time as you would measure it, or experience, the cradle of the earth presented individuals that were fully formed enough angelically to be able to carry on the business of creation and to work together to eventually create their own further sphere, and, therefore, to expand the Godhead through other individualizations and other facets of himself. I think if you look at what I have just said, you will see the reason why the universe is expanding, and you will understand why the universe branches out from that original central point. Because always, in the normal course of things, you have spheres where there are angelic intentions that coalesce into angelic children. And those angelic children move through a series of experiences and then give birth, as it were, to their own ideals and concepts in the form of other spheres and other angelic children. So the universe expands outwards from the God point. I must not get away from the subject, but I wanted to touch on that because I want to impress on you that your scientists talk about the expansion of the universe and they don't understand why it is happening. It did come from a central point, but it continues to expand because in other areas of this particular physical universe, there are other parts of the angelic host who are projecting energy into spheres or planets that they are creating. And they are creating angelic children of their own, who, on a spiritual level, are then going through a series of activities and experiences to the point where they can project and can create further spheres. And the process goes on, and on, and on. But let us concentrate on the earth sphere. Certain of the angelic children, having gone through a series of experiences on the earth plane, looked into the plan for the evolution of the earth sphere and felt that experience wasn't coming to them as quickly as they wanted it to. And, before they were ready to create in conjunction with God's plan and in harmony of the rest of the creative universe, they felt that they could instigate a different way of doing things. Now this is fine, and is what happens in many instances. God is always looking for new ways of experiencing himself, and always welcomes individual feedback that brings to him new ideas, new vistas, and new opportunities to express. However, there is a process, not in terms of an earthly process, but a process that must be observed in order to create correctly. You would not here, on earth, give a child some delicate and destructive machinery before it was ready to handle it, because that machinery has to be used in the right way in order for it to function as it is supposed to. There is a due process to creation, and that due process involves the manipulation of positive and negative forces in order to create balanced atoms that can put around you an illusion of whatever you want to create, and then just as quickly can be dematerialized by extracting the equal positive and negative forces within them, by taking those forces back into proto-matter and deconstructing the illusion of reality that you have created. Certain of the children, for they were children, felt that there was a different way of doing things, and that by speeding up the positive aspect and by withdrawing the negative aspect, they could move through a series of illusions more quickly than had been done at this point in other spheres and in the earth sphere itself. And, because all God's children have free will, there was no opposition to this. But it was pointed out that this would create an imbalance in the way that creation was formed, and would be a little like using a new cement that was difficult to degrade. So you would be putting bricks together with a cement that would be almost impossible to remove, and therefore it would be fine to construct your new illusions, but you would have difficulty in breaking them down afterwards. Unfortunately, this advice from the angelic parents involved at that time was listened to, but it was felt that here was a revolutionary new way of creation that would enhance God. Always at the beginning there was the intention of enhancing God, and of bringing back to the angelic host and to the Godhead pearls or a new aspect of God that would be beneficial to God, and would enable creation to run more quickly than it did at that time. There was, I suppose you would call it, the impatience of youth. The impatience of youth coupled with an ability to create at a point in youth's existence where they were not ready to create effectively. Or, to use another term, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. You have to understand that this process went on over what would seem to you to be millions of years, if you were measuring it from an earthly time point of view. And there was, if you like, a kindly and loving debate between the angelic host and the angelic children, with the suggestion from the angelic host that this was not the way to do things, and the suggestion coming back from the angelic children that this was the way to do things and would enhance the Godhead and the whole of creation. Whilst this debate was continuing, the angelic children did not come home. So invested were they in their quest to bring to the Godhead a unique way of creating that, at the end of their term of learning, they did not return to the angelic host because, from their point of view, there was still part of an ongoing discussion about what should be done next. So, again, through not undergoing due process, they began to remove themselves from the way that things should have happened, and to remove themselves from that refresher time when, under normal circumstances, they would have returned to the angelic host. They would have brought the angelic host their experiences. They would have examined those experiences in silence, in love and in harmony. And they would have come to the conclusions about those experiences that would then allow them to move on into other fields of creation. So, through intent, and the intent was to help God at this stage, they divorced themselves from that natural process of returning to the angelic host and regarding the earth's sphere as simply somewhere that was to be visited with a view to growing in experience and ability. As the debate both ways came to a withdrawal because neither side could agree on what the other side was saying, there came a time when, again in love, the angelic children decided that they would go ahead with their, to them, wonderful new way of approaching creation anyway. And again, anyway is perhaps a volatile word. They decided that they would go ahead with it for the good of God. Not despite what had been said to them, but, having observed and evaluated what had been said to them, they were going to, in effect, show the rest of the angelic host that they had a valid argument, that their way would create a series of experiences for the world that could be put into operation quite quickly, and would bring differing experiences back to the Godhead in a far shorter sequence of events than is used in the rest of the universes throughout physical reality. And so there came a point where the angelic children joined together as an angelic host and began to create, having altered, with the tools at their disposal, the positive side of creation and the negative energies of creation, causing both to become out of balance. And at that point the world began to become heavier, began to become more condensed, and its original crystalline formation, which was part of the original plan of creation, and therefore in harmony with the rest of the physical universe, became encapsulated and encrusted in heavier physical matter than is created elsewhere in order to sustain the illusion of reality. Having given all their will to this experiment, and having invested all their consciousness into it, at the point where they drew the energies together in an imbalanced way, they too became entrapped within physical matter, and their being became solidified. We will talk later about the niceties of how that happened, but in terms of examining the plan, they became entrapped, and the planet became entrapped. Also at that point, because they were entrapped in physical matter, the effect of altering the positive and negative on a global scale and in the surrounding area of space robbed them of their conscious memory of who they were and their connection to the angelic host and to the Godhead. So they voluntarily stepped into the illusion that they had created. 1 second they were angel children, and then, in the next split second, they were encased in physical matter, and from that point onwards found themselves adrift and alone from their point of view, because their point of view was, and still is, within the illusion that they had created that is out of balance. On other worlds, where matter is created as a balanced commodity, the landscape and the life forms you see on a physical level are far lighter than you experience here. Also, because of the balance, there is an ability to see through the illusion, back to the angelic host and the Godhead in consciousness. Whereas here, because of the solidity of matter that was caused by the experiment, you have to punch a way through that physical matter in order to restore your angelic and divine memories. A little about the positive and the negative. Drawing on the positive to create meant that from that time onwards, on this level of consciousness, there was only the negative energy to draw on. The positive, because it was not infused with the correct amount of the negative, could not be deconstructed. It would decompose because the positive needs the negative in balance in order to hold itself in form correctly. So there would be decomposition of the positive, which was then replaced by other projections of the positive. But the energy that was drawn on by the angelic children was actually negative, because they could not punch their way through to the angelic host and the Godhead. And here you see not the beginning of the field as such, because prior to the field there was a matrix of consciousness that could be described as the beginnings of the field, but certainly the beginnings of the physical field. So the beginnings of the physical field go right back to that time when the projection of matter into physical form was altered. Here Joseph paused for a while. I have to rest, because there are so many different concepts that we have to cover at this point. This is the crucial point. Although you will see when we examine physical society and physical life how the pattern repeats itself. But this morning I wanted to get to the nub of what went wrong. It was simply a matter of mistaken belief in potential. It wasn't an arrogance as such. It was simply a firm belief. And beliefs, such as the creation of physical matter, should be flexible enough to be changed. So the original mistake was to invest too much energy in a belief that was to the detriment of creation rather than to its evolution, and to hold that belief as the absolute way forwards, and mistakenly believe that that was what God wanted. God wants His children to create endlessly, yes. God gives them ultimate free will, yes. But God is a structure as well. God flows through the structure of the universe, and there are specific ways of creating, not as a law or as a thou shalt, but simply as the way that things work. And it was the way that things work that was corrupted originally that led to a consolidation of matter in a loop that could not be swept away and could not be converted, certainly not from within the confines and horizons of the venture, that resulted in things as they are at present. So the angelic children became immersed in their own venture, and they could not get out of that venture because they believed in it wholesale, each of them and as a whole, at the point where they immersed themselves in it. And they still do. So, built into the surface structure, not the spiritual structure, of the planet, is a belief. And that belief is that the world is right as it is because it is a shared venture that is right for God. Do you see the levels of corruption? Not earthly corruption, but twists of thinking that have led to this separation from God. Built into the physical form of yourselves and of the planet is an underlying subconscious belief that things are right as they are. And it is only through the conscience that each angelic child is able to discover that things are not right as they are. So there is a subconscious belief, particularly now, at this point in your re-evolution as physical beings, that things should be maintained as they are, and that you can change things from within this structure as it is, when it is the actual structure that needs to be deconstructed before things can be changed. These are difficult concepts because we are dealing in abstracts from your point of view, but only from your physical point of view and not spiritually. To sum things up in a few sentences, the world was a paradise. The angelic children believed that they could construct further paradises of their own, using a new wielding of creative matter of positive and negative energies. Those findings were brought back to the angelic host, not directly, and not by the spiritual physical presence, as it were, of the angelic children, but by their thoughts, as there was a communication with the angelic host at that time in thought that said, "We are proposing this." There was then a debate, which you would liken to the legends of a war in heaven, the war being a very gentle one of the word versus the new word, if you like, and argument, although it was not argument with violence in it, or proposals on either side were put forwards until the point where the angelic children felt that they had to demonstrate that they had a way that was of value to God and of value to creation. So, en masse, they joined together to create, and at that moment they changed the molecular structure of their constructs, and they plunged the earth into a heaviness, a darkness, and a stickiness that separated them physically, mentally, and spiritually from their prior access to the angelic host and to the divine. I want to rest this information at this point, because I will have to venture back into it next time to carry it forwards, as there is a lot, I think you will agree, to look at in this section. But before I rest Michael, and I have to say myself, I will invite questions to clarify anything that has been said this morning.
Joseph, could you just clarify about the positive and negative? I can understand how putting in more positive made matter heavier and more solid, but then I don't understand where the negative fits in, and why we can now only draw on negative energy.
They invested a predominance of positive energy into the illusion and into their ability to create. At the point where they solidified, as it were, their illusion, they were drawing on a limited supply of creative energy, because they could not reach beyond their experiment, as the vibrational rate of matter was different, and also the creative equation was different. First of all, they were separated in consciousness from what they had formerly been. And secondly, they were separated from the normal way of doing things. It is like connecting the terminals of a power supply, where the two sources of power are different. You can't connect them. And so they were left with their own creative abilities encapsulated, and a predominance of positive energy that they had given into form, so that they could only draw on a skewed blend of the positive and negative that was also coupled with their subconscious belief that is still here, and this is extremely important, that they were right, and that this is the way that you create. Do you see? They created an imbalance, and at the point that they created the imbalance, they believed in the imbalance totally, which is what you have to do in order to create anything. So when you attempt to create, you are still drawing on that imbalance. Much of the positive is invested in matter and in form, which leaves the negative energy. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand that now.
I know that this is a complex series of events to put into physical words, but we have to try and point out at some level, as we have done with the other books that inform beyond the words, and we have to penetrate that memory. This is what we hope to do with this book. To strike a chord. To strike that chord that happened at that moment of switching over to the venture. And on a soul level, to resonate with people so they say, yes, I don't totally understand, but I do remember. there is something in this. And at that point they begin to release themselves from physical matter as it is. Not physical matter as something that is wrong, because physical matter universally is not wrong. But physical matter here is wrong, because of the mixture and the blend. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I also wondered why, if matter is so solid with the positive, it shouldn't really decay, but it does decay.
You need a blend of positive and negative in equal amounts to allow the illusions that you place in front of you to be easily created and deconstructed. The positive needs the negative, and the negative needs the positive. And you cannot extract one from the other, or you end up with illusion that seems to be permanent, but decays because it does not have the other half of itself in the mix. You need further insight into creation, and this will be addressed, because we have to redress the balance, and need to make those who are capable of understanding draw on God energy once again, and understand the mechanics of God energy when putting an illusion into the world that replaces the one that you have at present. It is something that needs to be set out in a chapter, and not as a brief answer to a question. But do you understand the basis of what I have said?
Yes, thank you.
Another question, please.
Joseph, I have 100 questions going through my mind at the moment. This is amazing information, and if I did anger, I would be angry to think that we are the product of some naughty kids who did a science experiment, which we are now part of, and are held in that position by a group belief that we are doing this as a way to expand God. My question is that if the universal rules by which everything operates allows this to happen, surely this will have occurred in other places as well as on Earth. Or are we unique in being caught in a double bind where we find it very difficult to extricate ourselves from that situation?
In answer to your question, perhaps I can throw some light on the subject, if you will forgive the pun, by saying that the naughty children were us. We were the naughty children. You were the naughty children. I was one of the naughty children. Michael was one of the naughty children. At that point we were angelic beings, and still are. And with what we have said in previous talks about the reasons for the spiritual cleansing realms, I think we have also mentioned that we are escaping ourselves, and that we are opening the hatches, or the way back to the angelic host, to open communication with the angelic host and with the divine. Therefore, our focus is very much on the earth plane and the area of surrounding space, but we are visited, as I have said, at the highest level by those who have escaped, and by those from other worlds. And from what we can see of this particular physical universe, there are patterns that repeat, but there is nothing at present that is as dire, and I don't want to say irreversible, because that is not the right word, it is reversible, as set in stone as the venture that caused the present state of affairs on Earth. Until we escape into infinity through choice, and we choose at the moment to stay in the tunnel, as it were, between the 2 points, because we wish to help humankind and to extricate those angel children back into the fold, we do not have access to the progress of the universes. We also have to complete what we started. We began the process, and we have to end the process before we can move on. That too is one of God's, not laws, but the way that things work. You work through a situation that can bring you new experience from beginning to end, and then you set it aside. But in this case, we are working on an experience that we haven't set aside, so we do not have access to full knowledge as to whether this is happening anywhere else until we escape, through choice, into infinity. Then, once we have escaped into infinity, we are back as part of the original angel host from whence we came. That creative angelic host is, as we said at the beginning of the book, part of a greater angelic host. And so there are steps always, and at each step in our spiritual progress, a set of blinkers falls away. So the first step, whilst the angel child is on earth, is to take away the first set of blinkers. And then, as we have said in the book Your Life After Death, each experience through the spiritual spheres is in order to remove a further set of blinkers. And as each set of blinkers comes off, the vista widens. Am I still wearing blinkers? Yes. But I am aware of them, and I am aware that once I have successfully seen through the experience that I have decided to invest in, which is to convince as many souls during this present incarnation of which you are a part, once I have done that to the best of my ability, then I wish to move on. And I have to tell you that the immersion in physical matter of our last experience together, here Joseph is referencing the attack at the public trance demonstration, was extremely beneficial to me in giving me the impetus to make me want to move on totally. I mean that in all seriousness, in that it was a little like being trapped in a nightmare, as of course each of you is trapped in a nightmare constantly. And at the point when I returned to my sphere of illusion, I have to admit there was a yearning to move past that and never to experience it again. Such was the pull of the earth and the effects of the earth at that point. So I cannot say in all truth, hand on heart, that this has not occurred elsewhere, either in this particular expression of reality you call the universe, or in other expressions of reality in other universes. However, I do feel, because we have a feeling for physical existence the higher we climb, that there are at least 2 points where there have been similar points of view, but they have not resulted in the lockout that you experience on Earth. It is my feeling, although I have not investigated it fully, there is only so much that even we can give our attention to, that the debate and the ensuing toing and froing of information has already succeeded in one of the cases in convincing the angelic children that it would not be to their advantage to go that route. The other vibration is still in debate, and I would like to say I will keep you posted, but I feel that by the time the debate has been concluded, you will be well on your way to remembering this experience that you are a part of as simply a glitch in your infinite existence. Is there another question, please?
Joseph, we do appreciate and are extremely grateful for everything you're doing for us. It is just on such an enormous scale.
It is an enormous scale, and it is a microscopic scale. Because the answer to everything that I tell you in this book is within. And the switch that stops you producing the imbalance is within. It is a rediscovery of knowledge. And so the concepts that we are looking at seem to be so complex and vast. But the solution to returning to that blissful co-creation with God is simple. And is not out in the illusion of an infinite universe, but is within the soul. At this point, David, do you have a question?
Just a very brief one about the imbalance between negative and positive forces. Is that what has brought about our inability to draw on God energy fully? In other words, nothing is being cycled, and slowly things are being drained down.
It was an instant encapsulation. Instant as you would measure time. Imagine that you find yourself sitting in this room now, and then in the next second you are totally encased and have no knowledge of the room. It was a matter of the entire host of angelic children on earth deciding at one point, in conjunction with each other, to set off on the course that they had considered to be valid, and at that point it encapsulated their creative ability because it cut off their creative source consciously, and subconsciously to a great extent. So it is a finite amount of matter that you are dealing with on earth. And I hope this illuminates what we have said in the other books. And yes, it is an inability. there is not enough ability to maintain form, and there is not enough ability to completely destroy form. So you live in a constantly shifting collapse and decay of the beautiful forms that you should be bringing through. And we will talk about it, because we have to speak about aspects of the fall. And I hope now you understand why we call it the fall. Because you tumbled into your own creation. You fell away from the rest of God and the rest of the angelic host. Not totally, and you were never disconnected really, and are not disconnected now. But you fell away in aspect and in belief. You fell into what you perceive around you, but you can also walk out of it. You fell in, but you can walk out. So yes, the imbalance of matter means that the structures that you create are not stable. Nothing you create is stable when you draw on the energies that you encapsulated with you at the time of the fall. What is stable, and what does last forever until you decide to deconstruct it, is what you bring through from beyond the encapsulation. And that is the light that you reach beyond the encapsulation to bring from the angelic host and from God. Those concepts that change the world are permanent as long as you wish them to be, because they are God energy, which is in balance. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.